From 1993 until 2019, crime decreased almost every single year in New York City. Almost every year. That's 26 years of downward crime rate. And it was on a downward trajectory even up until 2019. In 2019, New York State passed the bail reform laws. And everybody has heard about it. It refers to it as cashless bail. What that meant was that judges could not set bail on a whole host of cases, no matter what the defendant's record was, no matter how he committed the crime. If he was charged with a specific crime, a judge could not set bail. And what those crimes were almost every single misdemeanor, every single drug case, everyone, from A1 felonies, 15 kilos, 20 kilos, 1,000,000 kilos, a judge could not set bail on those defendants under the bail reform laws that were passed in 2019. Car thieves, no. Burglars, no, could not set bail. And what happened, those laws were passed on April 1st of 2019. They became effective on January 1st of 2020. On January 1st of 2020, every single person in a New York City jail who was charged with drugs, misdemeanors, car theft, burglary, robbery in the second degree, any whole host of other crimes had to be released because a judge could not set bail on him. And because a judge couldn't set bail on him on January 1st, any bail that had been set prior to January 1st had to be changed to an ROR status. In other words, he had to be released on his own recognizance. So by January 1st of 2020, 2,000 people walked out of Rikers Island. Every single person charged with car theft, every single person charged with drug possession, every single person charged with burglary in the second degree, which is a residential burglary, every person charged with petty larceny, every person charged with, actually, at the time, every person charged with escape, every person charged with bail jumping was released from Rikers Island. It was 2,000 people. Now, the court system looked at this and said, well, we can't have 2,000 people walk out of Rikers Island on one day, on January 1st. The optics would just be terrible. We wouldn't be able to live that down. So they started releasing people in October, November, and December of 2019. And they released them in small batches. You know, as their cases came up, the judges would change their bail from $10,000 bail down to ROR. So by January 1st, those 2,000 people were released. So the population of of New York City jails went from about 7,800 in April of 2019 to 5,800 by January 1st. And what happened? Crime went up. Why did crime go up? Because there were 2,000 more criminals on the street. I use the example, if all of a sudden 2,000 more plumbers showed up in New York City, you'd get a lot more leaks fixed. So when you release 2,000 career criminals onto the streets, you're going to get more crime. And what's important to note is that the people who were released were not just first-time offenders, because those people were not being held on bail. They weren't people who had no criminal records, because those are not the people who were being held on bail. The people who were being held on bail were people who had an average of 14 prior arrests and 8 prior convictions. All of those people walked out of jail by January 1st of 2020. So I said crime went up. Well, it did. And by March 15th of 2020, crime in New York City went up 20%, just in those 2.5 months. After going down for 27 years, just in those 2.5 months, it went up 20%. And it went up in all the categories which the people had been released. It went up in car theft, went up 68%. Burglaries went up about 15%. Robberies went up. Petty larcenies went up. All those people who were charged with those crimes who had been released are now going back to committing the crimes that they had committed before they were incarcerated in Rikers. Now, the important thing about March 15th of 2020, what happened after March 15th of 2020? That's when COVID hit. Now, everybody's blaming, oh, the crime went up because of COVID, as if there was something in that virus that caused people to steal cars. And it's just ridiculous. The crime started going up as those people were being released and as they hit the streets. Then what happened in New York City? Once COVID hit, New York City started to release more prisoners from jail because they were concerned about the virus spreading in the correctional system. So by July actually it was earlier than that, by May or June of 2020, the city released another 1,500 people from Rikers Island, and that brought the population of Rikers down to under 4,000. From 7,800 a year earlier, it went down to 4,000. And what happened was, because the people who are left after bail reform, the people who are left in jail, in New York City jails, were a lot more violent. There were a lot more severe criminals. There were people who were charged with crimes for which a judge could set bail: robbery in the first degree, attempted murder, all the violent crimes. And they were started releasing them as COVID hit in April and May of 2020. And what happened in April and May and June of 2020? Violent crime started to go up in New York City. That's when you had the rise in murders. Murders by the end of 2020 went up almost 50%. Shootings in New York City went up 100%. They doubled just from 2019 to 2020. The other thing that happened that exacerbated a lot of the crime rise in New York City, especially the violent crime, was on June 15th of 2020, Mayor de Blasio convinced the police commissioner to do away with the anti-crime units.